The open road has always been my second home. As a trucker for over 2 decades, I've seen my fair share of strange things in the dead of night. But nothing could have prepared me for what I experienced on that fateful run from Tulsa to Albuquerque. It was a crisp autumn evening when I climbed into my rig, ready for another long haul. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple as I pulled out of the truck stop. Little did I know, those would be the last warm colors I'd see for a while. The first few hours were uneventful. Just me, my thermos of coffee, and the steady hum of tires on asphalt. But as midnight approached and I crossed into New Mexico, an uneasy feeling crept over me. The moon, full and bright earlier, had vanished behind a thick blanket of clouds. The darkness seemed to press in on all sides, barely held at bay by my headlights. That's when I first saw her. A lone figure standing on the shoulder, thumb out. Now, I'm not one to pick up hitchhikers, especially at this hour, but something made me slow down. As I approached, I could make out more details. A young woman, couldn't have been more than 20, with long dark hair and a white dress that seemed to glow in my headlights. I pulled over, against my better judgment. "Where you headed, miss?" I called out the window. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just up the road a ways," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mind if I catch a ride?" I hesitated, then nodded. She climbed in, and I immediately regretted my decision. The cab temperature dropped at least 20 degrees, and I could see my breath misting in front of me. "You all right?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You must be freezing in that dress." She turned to me, and I nearly drove off the road. Her eyes were completely black, no whites visible at all. "I'm quite comfortable," she said, her smile widening to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth. "But you might want to watch the road." I whipped my head back to the windshield and slammed on the brakes. A massive black shape was lumbering across the highway, easily the size of a small house. It looked vaguely like a bear, but with too many limbs and a head that seemed to split open into a maw full of writhing tentacles. "What the hell?" I gasped, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The creature paused, turning to face us. A dozen glowing red eyes blinked in unison, and I felt a scream building in my throat. "Oh, that's just the gatekeeper," my passenger said casually. "He likes to check on new arrivals." I turned to ask her what she meant, but the seat beside me was empty. The cab was warm again, and through the windshield, I could see nothing but empty road stretching into the darkness. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. I fumbled for my phone, desperate to call someone, anyone, but the screen remained stubbornly dark. Dead battery? No signal? I couldn't be sure. I drove on, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. Every shadow seemed to move, every reflection in my mirrors a potential threat. I found myself talking out loud, trying to convince myself that what I'd seen wasn't real. "Just tired," I muttered. "Overworked. Brain playing tricks on me. That's all it is." But deep down, I knew better. The chill that had settled into my bones wasn't from fatigue or the night air. It was the cold touch of something beyond my understanding. As the miles ticked by, I began to notice other strange occurrences. Road signs that seemed to change every time I blinked. Impossible geographical features looming in the distance, mountains where there should be plains, vast bodies of water where I knew there was only desert. And the other vehicles on the road, something was off about them. Trucks that seemed to stretch impossibly long in my rearview mirror. Cars that moved in jerky, unnatural ways, as if operated by something that had only a vague idea of how humans drive. I tried to rationalize it all away, but the evidence of my senses was becoming harder and harder to deny. Somewhere along the way, I had taken a wrong turn, not just off my planned route, but off the map of reality itself. The radio crackled to life, startling me so badly I nearly ran off the road. Through the static, I could make out a voice, "Lost souls gathered here tonight. Your journey is not yet complete. The toll must be paid." I reached out with a trembling hand to change the station, but every frequency carried the same message, growing clearer with each repetition. The toll must be paid. In flesh, in blood, in sanity. Choose your sacrifice, traveler. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I wanted to pull over, to run screaming into the night, but some instinct told me that leaving the relative safety of my truck would be a fatal mistake. So I drove on, deeper into the nightmare landscape. The sky above had taken on a sickly greenish hue, and shapes moved within the roiling clouds, vast, winged things that defied description. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time seemed to have lost all meaning. My fuel gauge never dropped below half, even though I knew I should have run out long ago. The only constant was the voice on the radio, endlessly repeating its demand for a toll. I began to wonder if I had died somewhere back on that lonely stretch of New Mexico highway. Was this hell? Purgatory? Or something even stranger? As these thoughts swirled in my mind, I caught sight of something in my side mirror. Another truck, gaining on me fast. Relief washed over me finally, another person, someone I could talk to, someone who could confirm that I wasn't losing my mind. But as the truck drew closer, that relief turned to ice in my veins. The cab was empty. No driver, just a swirling black mist where a person should be. And emblazoned on the side of the trailer, in letters that seemed to writhe and change as I watched, was a single word: collector. I floored the accelerator, pushing my rig to its limits. The speedometer climbed past 100, 120, numbers I knew my truck shouldn't be capable of reaching. But the collector kept pace effortlessly, always just a few lengths behind. The radio voice grew louder, more insistent. Choose your sacrifice, traveler. Time grows short. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the choice before me. My flesh? My blood? Or my sanity? Which could I afford to lose? As the collector's truck inched closer, its grille morphing into a gaping maw lined with metallic teeth, I knew I had to decide. But how does one make such an impossible choice? My hands tightened on the wheel as I prepared to. make my choice. The collector's truck was so close now I could hear the grinding of its metal teeth, hungry for whatever sacrifice I would offer. In that moment of desperation, a memory flashed through my mind. An old trucker I'd met years ago at a dive bar in Reno. He'd been drunk, rambling about the dark roads and how to survive them. I dismissed him as a kook back then, but now. When the collector comes, he'd said, his roomy eyes intense, you gotta offer something it don't expect. Something that ain't yours to give. With the collector's headlights filling my mirrors, I made my choice. I offer the miles. I shouted. All the miles I've driven, all the miles I've yet to drive. My past and my future on the road. Take them. The radio screeched, a sound of surprise and fury. The collector's truck swerved, as if confused. For a moment, I thought I'd outsmarted whatever cosmic horror game I'd found myself in. But then the world around me began to change. The road beneath my wheels turned to writhing black tentacles. The sky split open, revealing a vast, eyeless face that filled the horizon. And from every direction came a chorus of voices, some human, some very much not all crying out in anguish or ecstasy, I couldn't tell which. "Foolish mortal," the radio crackled. "You offer what was never truly yours. The miles belong to the road, and the road belongs to us. But we accept your sacrifice, and more." Suddenly, I felt a tugging sensation, as if something essential was being pulled from my very being. Memories flashed before my eyes, every trip I'd ever taken, every state line I'd crossed, every truck stop I'd visited. They were being stripped away, leaving only a hollow emptiness behind. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My hands, still gripping the wheel, began to fade, becoming translucent. I watched in horror as my entire body started to disappear, merging with the truck itself. Just when I thought it was over, that I would cease to exist entirely, everything stopped. I found myself still in the driver's seat, but changed. My flesh had become chrome and steel, my blood replaced by diesel. I was the truck now, or perhaps the truck was me. I couldn't be sure anymore. The world around me had returned to normal, or at least, what passed for normal on this nightmare highway. The collector was gone, but I could feel its presence lingering, watching from just beyond the veil of reality. As I drove on, I began to notice other trucks on the road. At first glance, they seemed ordinary, but a closer look revealed the truth. In each cab sat a driver like me, part human, part machine, all of us bound to our rigs and to the endless road. One of them pulled up alongside me, the driver turning to meet my gaze. His eyes were headlights, his smile a grill. When he spoke, his voice came through my radio. "Welcome to the fleet, newcomer," he said. "You're one of us now. An eternal driver on the midnight roads." What are we?" I asked, my voice sounding tinny and mechanical. He laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "We're the ones who keep the wheels turning, kid. The cosmic truckers, hauling reality's cargo from one universe to the next. It's a hell of a job, but somebody's gotta do it." As if on cue, my trailer began to feel heavy, loaded with something I couldn't name. An overwhelming urge to drive, to deliver this unknown cargo, filled me. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, panic rising in my now mechanical heart. The other driver just shrugged. "You'll know when you get there. We always do." With that, he accelerated, disappearing into the night. I found myself doing the same, an invisible force guiding me onward. The landscape outside my windows shifted constantly. One moment I was driving through a desert of blue sand and 3 moons, the next I was navigating a city of impossible geometry where the buildings moved and breathed. Time lost all meaning as I drove. I saw wonders and horrors beyond imagination. Planets where the laws of physics were mere suggestions. Realities where thought itself was a tangible force. And always, there were roads to be driven and cargo to be delivered. Sometimes I encountered other drivers like myself, eternal truckers bound to the cosmic highways. We would share stories at impossible truck stops that existed between dimensions. Tales of close calls with eldritch horrors, of deliveries to gods and monsters, of the lonely beauty found in the spaces between worlds. I learned that we were essential, we cosmic truckers. Without us, reality itself would grind to a halt. We carried the raw stuff of creation, the building blocks of universes, the dreams and nightmares that shape existence. It was a heavy responsibility, but one we bore with pride. But it wasn't all cosmic wonder and interdimensional adventure. There were dangers out here on the endless roads. Things that hunted us, drawn by the precious cargo we carried. Vast, unknowable entities that saw our trucks as little more than snacks, and the universes we traversed as their playgrounds. I had my share of close calls. Once, I spent what felt like centuries fleeing from a living black hole that had developed a taste for chrome and diesel. Another time, I narrowly escaped a swarm of parasitic ideas that tried to infect my cargo, threatening to twist an entire newborn universe into a mockery of itself. Through it all, I drove on. The hunger for the next delivery, the next horizon, never left me. I was the truck was me, and together we were something more, a crucial cog in the vast machine of reality. But as eons passed, a new feeling began to grow within me. A longing for something I'd lost, something I could barely remember. Humanity. The simple pleasure of feeling the wind on my skin, of eating a greasy burger at a truck stop, of sharing a beer with fellow drivers. This longing grew stronger with each delivery, each cosmic mile traveled. I found myself seeking out the most dangerous routes, taking on the riskiest cargo, hoping that somehow I might find a way to break free from this eternal duty. And then, on a routine run through a particularly unstable part of the multiverse, I saw something that made my fuel pump stutter. A familiar stretch of highway, cutting through the New Mexico desert. The same road where my journey had begun, countless lifetimes ago. Without thinking, I took the exit. Alarms blared in my cab, warning me of breach of duty, of cosmic consequences. I ignored them all. For the first time since I'd become this hybrid being, I was choosing my own path. As I barreled down that lonely highway, memories long buried began to surface. I remembered who I had been, the life I'd left behind. The weight of countless eons pressed down on me, threatening to crush my newfound sense of self. But I pressed on, pushing my rig to impossible speeds. The world around me began to blur, reality itself seeming to protest my defiance. In my mirrors, I could see them coming for me, the collector, the cosmic horrors, perhaps even those who had transformed me in the first place. I was moments away from breaking through. I could feel it. The boundary between trucker and truck, between cosmic being and simple human, was growing thin. With one final burst of speed, I prepared to shatter that barrier, to reclaim my humanity or be destroyed in the attempt. As the forces pursuing me closed in, as the very fabric of reality trembled around me, I caught a glimpse of something in the distance. A truck stop, shimmering like a mirage. My salvation or my doom, I couldn't be sure. With the last of my strength, I aimed for that promise of normalcy, that hint of the life I'd left behind. Whatever waited for me there, freedom, oblivion, or some fate I couldn't even imagine, I was ready to face it. The truck stop grew larger and my windshield as the howls of my pursuers grew louder. In those final moments, a sense of peace washed over me. Whatever happened next, I had made my choice. I was more than just a cosmic trucker, more than a cog in the machine of reality. I was me again, for better or worse. As I burst through the boundary between worlds, the familiar neon of the truck stop sign filling my vision, I had just one thought: home. I was finally going home. The last thing I saw was the truck stop parking lot rushing up to meet me. Then, everything went white. I awoke with a start, my heart pounding. I was in my cab, parked at a nondescript truck stop. The clock on my dashboard showed I'd been asleep for hours. Just a dream? But as I rubbed my eyes, I noticed something odd. My hands seemed different somehow. More solid, yet also less real. And in the distance, beyond the normal sounds of idling trucks and the chatter of fellow drivers, I could hear something else. The faint echo of cosmic wheels on interdimensional highways. I sat there for a long moment, my hand on the ignition key. Part of me wanted to start the engine, to pull out of this truck stop and never look back. To convince myself it had all been a vivid nightmare brought on by too many hours on the road. But another part of me knew better. Knew that the journey I'd just experienced was far from over. That the cosmic highways were still out there, still in need of drivers. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, I made my decision. I turned the key, feeling the engine rumble to life beneath me. But instead of pulling out onto the familiar interstate, I closed my eyes and focused on that faint, otherworldly sound. The truck stop around me began to fade, reality shifting and blurring. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on that impossible cosmic road, my truck once again a part of me. But this time, it was different. This time, I was in control. Not just a cog in the machine, but a willing participant in this grand, terrifying adventure. With a smile that was part human, part chrome grill, I pressed down on the accelerator. The cosmic highway stretched out before me, endless and full of possibility. I don't know where this road will take me next. What wonders I'll see, what horrors I'll face. But one thing's for certain, it's going to be one hell of a ride. And who knows? Maybe someday, I'll find my way back to that little truck stop in New Mexico. Back to the world I left behind. But until then, I've got deliveries to make and universes to explore. So if you're ever driving down a dark, lonely highway in the dead of night, and you see a truck that doesn't look quite right, a little too shiny, a little too real, give us a wave. We cosmic truckers might be bound to our endless routes, but we never forget the roads that made us who we are. Keep on truckin', folks. In this universe and all the others,